Peace. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ron's Library and Ideas. This is Ron coming to you. Today, we're going to be in chapter 18 of the book Satan, an autobiography as told to Yehuda Berg. Chapter 18, test number 9. Do you know when to give and when to receive? I am particularly skillful when it comes to messing up relationships. And boy, do you let me push your buttons. It's no wonder that most of the relationships in your life seem off balance, one-sided, and unfulfilling. You're letting me play my games again. When will you learn? How about starting now? Here's how it works. In every relationship, there is one person that is more giving and one that is more receiving. This is by design. Whether you are the giver, the light, or the receiver, the vessel, you need to find a way to stay a complete person in both roles. It's about knowing when to be a vessel and when to be the light. Only by knowing how to operate in relationships and by being tested to find your correct role can your greatness be revealed. In order to push your buttons and make you forget your job, I will convince you it's best to be a taker and not a giver. Persuade you that being a teacher or parent means being a friend. Entice you into believing that setting boundaries with your child is something that only mean parents do. Lure you into leaning on your student, child, or employee as a trusted confidant instead of developing healthy adult relationships with others. In response to my tactics, and because you don't understand the duality of roles and relationships and the specific role you are meant to play, resentment will inevitably arise. If you are a parent or a teacher or the dominant giver, I'll make you feel that you are being taken advantage of, ripped off, or that you aren't getting any return on your investment. I make you feel unappreciated, and you, in turn, make the other person feel like crap. You have expectations for the relationship that aren't meant to be, and you fail to accept the role you are meant to play. No wonder you feel unfulfilled in your most important relationships. No wonder you're always ticked off at someone. In fact, most of the people's problems stem from unbalanced relationships. Parents have issues with their children, children with their parents, bosses with their employees, employees with their bosses. The reason for this is that it is your nature to seek balance, but, in truth, it is part of the very nature of relationships like parent/child or employer/employee that there will never be a balance. The nature of the relationship itself is imbalance. A child is not meant to parent his parent. She becomes a parent only when she has her own child. Is this making sense? The parent-child relationship. The test of being a parent can be especially challenging, for it is a direct representation of the relationship between you and your parent, the Creator. Just like you push back from the Creator every time you listen to me, children will test the giver/receiver dynamic of the parent-child relationship. That's what kids do. Here's what I do. I convince you that the role of the parent as the constant giver of light and the child as the constant receiver is unbalanced, while in fact, that is the nature of the relationship. So, the test for you is to accept the imbalance. This is not only true for traditional parent-child relationships, it also holds true for employer-employee relationships, teacher-student relationships, or any other type of relationship in which a person plays the role of nurturer or mentor. This is why I encourage you to do things like abandon your role as a parent for a more enjoyable role as your child's best friend. Don't buy into it. By becoming friends with your child, employee, or student, you are forfeiting your role as the giver of light. Even if you only give up your role a tiny bit, it doesn't matter. The second you are on the same level, you've compromised the integrity of the giver-receiver relationship. The teacher-student relationship. The teacher-student relationship operates in the same exact way. It's a relationship that can never be 50-50. That's because the creator didn't design a universe that operates at 50% capacity. You have to be willing to offer 100% light all the time to your student or child. Allow that individual to become a creator to you and the system collapse. Instead, the student must become a teacher to someone else, and the child must become a parent to his or her own child. Being a parent or a teacher has its own reward. It reveals its own light. But you can't expect your light to come from your kid or your student. Sure, I'll make you feel needy for love and approval. Sure, I'll make you want to take light from the very person you are meant to give light to. I thrive on neediness, unmet expectations, and disappointment. That is why the only way around me is to accept that some relationships are imbalanced for a reason. They allow you to reach your fullest potential. They allow you to reveal massive amounts of light. They allow you to neutralize me. From the eyes of the child. As the child or the student in the relationship, you've got to be your own person while still respecting the space of the dominant giver in your life. As a child or a student, cultivating a sense of reverence is essential. After all, you can never repay your parents for bringing you to this earth, or your teacher for putting your soul on a path toward God. That stuff is priceless. I'll try to convince you that it is time to be your own person. Sounds so empowering, doesn't it? Reject your mom. Reject your dad. Your teacher doesn't know squat, I'll say. But you don't have to reject anyone in order to feel fulfilled. Your fulfillment comes when you allow the light and vessel to coexist, the giver and the receiver to work together as one. You don't need someone else to feel worthless in order for you to experience love. Just the opposite. When you see the value of your respective roles, that's when the love starts pouring in. You become one. You eliminate the need for ego. You eliminate the need for me. Going for a walk. Here's another way I go after relationships. I make you totally forget what it means to be in the other person's shoes. Understanding and compassion. Yeah, right. I encourage you to talk to them from where you are spiritually and emotionally instead of meeting them where they are. If you are in one of the unbalanced relationships I'm talking about here, and you're trying to talk to the other person from your point of consciousness, forget ever being able to connect with that person. It's not going to happen. The result? Frustration on both ends and no room for light. How can you change this dynamic? You start by taking a walk, a little stroll in their shoes. If they are the student, then that is the spiritual space that they occupy. Although you can't simultaneously occupy the same space with them, you can use the tool of empathy. Empathy is free of judgment and scorn, which makes it free of me. Another part of correcting the energy dynamic in relationships is walking the walk. In other words, being an ambassador of the light. If you are a parent, your child is watching you. If you are a teacher, you better believe your student is taking in all that you say and do, like a sponge. This is an enormous responsibility, but it is also the tremendous opportunity to model actions and behaviors that are in line with whom you really are. a being of pure love and light, if you've already forgotten when I'm not running the show. Even if you think no one is watching, you still need to walk the walk. The walls are watching, and that is all that matters. The Zohar, one of my least favorite books, because it is written in Aramaic and I cannot access it, and because it reveals tremendous light, explains that the walls of your house are the walls of your heart. So, even if your child's eyes are not on you, behave as if they are. Partner of the light. I knew a soul once whom I could not enter. There was just no room for me. But you wouldn't have known it by looking on the outside. If you were a fly on the wall, you would have seen a guy who appeared to be a slave of mine. He worked like a madman, slept like a mummy, ate like an animal, and drank like a fish. Everything he did was to the extreme. But this was a guy who could heal people. I had to know how he was making this work. Perhaps I could have guessed, but instead I chose to ask him, how come if you work, sleep, and drink like a madman, I can't get in? How can you heal others when you appear to be sick with compulsion yourself? He told me, when I was a child, I made a deal with God that I would be God's partner. So I do everything for God. I eat for God. I sleep for God. And I work for God. And in return, God makes my blessings come true. This guy put in his 100% and God returned the favor. I couldn't argue with that. It doesn't matter which part of the relationship is your responsibility. You have a job to do. Just as the other person in the relationship carries a burden to do his or her part. No one has more or less weight to carry from the perspective of the universe. A student doesn't carry any less weight than a teacher. A parent doesn't carry a heavier burden than a child. An employee doesn't have less responsibility than his employer. You are all equally responsible for one another. Are you catching on? This is important stuff. It is this consciousness that constantly creates the circuitry of the universe. You are never more or less than anyone else. You are the same in terms of what you bring to the table. Your job is just as vital as the next person's. Whether you choose to believe this is entirely up to you. Everything is. Here I come. Before I move ahead, I need to establish one last expectation as it relates to test taking in the context of God's classroom. The challenges, tests, doubts, and fear that you experience on your path will come at you again, but from different angles, and they'll come at you harder and faster. But if you can use the info that I'm offering here in this book, each test that you pass will only serve to make you stronger. That's because as you pass each test, you reveal more and more light. When you have the power of the light, you can overcome any single challenge or obstacle that I'll throw in your face. Now I need to give you a sense of urgency. You can't simply rest on your laurels anymore because now, more than ever, time is of the essence. You've been asleep for way too long. The work you've done today is not enough for tomorrow. The person you are today isn't enough for tomorrow either. I will be stronger, so you must be stronger too. Each day is a day for more preparation and more growth. This isn't a 100-meter sprint we're in, it's a marathon, and we are on the final stretch. All right, that brings us to the end of this chapter. And the first thing that I want to say is that we all have a role to play down here. And that role will change, and you may be playing multiple roles at once. It's up for you to decide and to learn how to best play your role. Because when you're doing that, things will work a little smoother in your relationship and your life as well. One of the things that's apparent to me now, after reading this book and seeing how society has been shifted as time has been going on, is that the roles that people are supposed to play, they are becoming more and more blurred and more confused. And because of that, relationships are suffering. And I'm not just talking relationships between man and woman, husband and wife. I'm talking about all relationships. There's a imbalance there that is something that has to be worked on. And the best way to work on it is to do it individually. Hearing this type of information, going out and seeking to be a better person, finding tools on that, that's how you fix that. But you have to have a want to do that. You have to have a want, a desire to do that as well. If you're comfortable with who you are and it doesn't bother you at all, pay this no mind. But if you're trying to better yourself, this is something that I think you should take heed to. I do not have any children of my own yet, but I do know that relationship between parent and child is one of the most important relationships that can be had in this world. Because that dynamic, that power structure is going to set the child up for the rest of its life. Either it's going to have either he or she is going to have a good foundation, or that foundation is going to be shaky. And that's something that child is going to have to deal with later on in life. Now, being that I'm not a parent, I know there's no one universal way to raise children, but I think it's important to be open to different ideas. So if you are the type of parent that wants to be your child's best friend, I think there's some things that you can learn about that. Just that idea that there's givers of light and receivers of light. You have to find that wisdom in yourself to know when are you supposed to play that role. When it comes to that teacher-student relationship, one of the ways that you can see how that gets messed up, and I've been seeing it more and more lately, especially from women, or maybe it's just being highlighted more. But whenever you have teachers sleeping with their students, something has gone horribly wrong with that power dynamic. And it's like you see a new case of it every few weeks where there's some teacher messing with his student, or a female teacher messing with her student. It's kind of sad that we reached this point, but this type of information and sharing it. And by the way, I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, share this with somebody who you think could use it. By our sharing this information and letting someone come across it for themselves, this is how we change the world. And you do it first by, like my man Michael Jackson said, starting with the man in the mirror, or the woman in the mirror. And that idea of empathy, the author said something else that stood out to me in this chapter. He said, going for a walk, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. If you have the ability to do that, you also have the ability to bring much wisdom into your life, or bring much wisdom to yourself. Because one of the things that I found is that a lot of people have a hard time being empathetic towards others. They simply cannot put themselves in the other person's shoes, or they simply refuse to do it. They're completely self-centered. But the ironic thing is, when you are self-centered, you miss out on the fact that by putting yourself in the other person's shoes, you bring more wisdom into yourself, so it makes you better as a person. You can comprehend and understand different perspectives Only being able to see something one way, that's a very human and mundane way of looking at the universe. When you're speaking or you're working towards that higher aspect of yourself, you're sitting right there in the middle and you can see the duality and the pros and the cons on each side. And then you can find that middle path. Spiritually, I believe that is the goal, being able to find that middle path. But this is going to do it for this chapter. We're very close towards the end of this book. You guys, let me know what you think. Have you seen some unbalanced power dynamics in your life? After listening to this information, do you see where, oh, wow, I may be doing some of these things that I shouldn't be doing when it comes to a power dynamic? Experiment with it. Try it out for yourself and see how it works out. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button and the share button and subscribe if you aren't subscribed. And check out some of my other videos. I just did a video yesterday that got published about the CIA and the FBI's involvement during the hippie movement and how that ties into the Black Panthers. You'll see it on my channel. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. This is Ron, and I'll see y'all in the next episode. Peace.